Welcome to the Byword Show. I'm your host, Hannah Hughes. Bywords is all about equipping women for purposeful living by starting conversations, celebrating stories, and inspiring faith. In a world that applauds the hustle, I'm here to help you break free from the lies and come back to what really matters. It's time to get real, get rooted in truth, and come alive in relationship with Jesus so you can show up to each day with intention and confidence no matter where you're at in your story. Here we believe that embracing our stories brings hope, healing, and purpose to the process, and sharing our stories helps others do the same. Whether you're looking for a midweek faith refresh, practical tools for pursuing your dreams, or just need some good old-fashioned girl talk, you're in the right place. Grab your latte and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Byword Show. Today is the day. I am so glad you're here. You guys, we're going to have fun. We are already having fun, honestly. We've got Clio Divitis with us. I was just asking her how to say her last name correctly, and she gave me full permission to just do the whole Italian,
you got to do it.
We love it. If you're not watching passage, we're like doing the hand gesture. Also, my daughter just woke up. So like all the things are happening right off the bat. Anyway, we're just going to have fun today, basically, is what I'm getting at. So
yes, here we
go. Clio, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
Would you really quickly just kind of introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, of course. Okay, so Clio Divitis. I am 24 years old. I was born and raised in SoCal around like Ventura County area. People who don't know that, I'm like, it's halfway between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. So near the coast, but not right on it. Let's see. I kind of grew up as a believer. I grew up kind of in the Catholic Church and then had a friend invite me to Hume Lake Christian camps, which like totally changed my life and totally found Jesus there. So I have a huge heart for nature, love being outside. And yeah, just kind of grew up always writing, and I loved music so much, but could not sing to save my life. And so all of the songs that I was writing turned into poetry. And so that is kind of how writing got started. And I decided to do English as my major in college. A bunch of my English teachers in high school were like, you could totally do it. Like, you always have a book glued to your hand. This is your calling. And I always would like ask for whiteboard markers and books for my birthday. And that is not a common thing for a child. And so I was like, I think I want to be a teacher too. So took English and took teaching and married the two loves and became an English teacher. So now I teach 8th grade English at a middle school, and that is fun, being around hundreds of teenagers all day, every day.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the thing. And now I am married. I will have our 2-year anniversary next month, which is super fun. And so married to my husband, Gabe, we moved back to his hometown a year ago this month. And so it's been super fun. We're now in like the San Francisco area. So it's been a wild adventure so far, but it's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. How cool. Yeah. It's so fun when I hear people's stories and then they point back to moments in their childhood where people started calling those things out of them. It's like, man, that's so cool how God put it in you from the beginning. Right. I just love that so much. And what a cool, like you said, adventure of going through the whole process, I'm sure. And I'd love to hear more about that. And especially because you just published your book. You guys, I'm holding it up. It's so beautiful.
Look at that. We're twins. We've got our copies right here.
So beautiful. I love it. And actually, you guys, by the time this episode is out, this will be launch week. So this book is about to come out. I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it. And I would just love to hear your story of what got you from the initial like passion for writing to like now we have this book in our hands that you wrote, which congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
And just what was the heart behind writing it? What do you want your readers to get from it?
Oh, that's a good question. So I have, like I said, always loved books. Like I have probably 10 different library cards. Like every city I go to, I'm like, I need to have access to books. So I just have always loved writing, and it's always been the dream of mine to be an author. But it's a very one of those like 1 in a million unrealistic kind of dreams. It's like being a famous musician or being a movie star. It's like, good luck, buddy. And so I in college was like, okay, you know what? I write poems like every single day. I had kind of trained myself like an athlete of like, okay, you have to practice this to get good at it. And so every single day I would write at least 3 poems. And now I'm like thousands of poems into my journals, like many journals deep. And so really it was like, okay, if I want to be good at this, I have to practice. And so in college, I was like, okay, I have enough. I think I could maybe whip together a book. And so I started pulling things and had like Google Docs and sticky notes and everything. Like my table was a mess of just ideas and brainstorming. And I was having a really hard time finding a publisher. Like you submit it and you get all those rejection emails of like, not now, or we like it, send something else, but not today, and all of that. And I have a huge ego, and so that was a shot to my pride every single time, and was continually reminding myself like, okay, it's just not the Lord's time. Like it's gonna come if it comes, but right now it's not coming, and that's okay. And it's funny because I'm thinking now, like 4 years ago, if the book that I had in my head was published, that would not be very good. And so I'm very glad that the Lord made me wait and get a little bit better. But around COVID time, I year-ish into dating my now husband, and he was like, Cleo, like it's good to just kind of put it out there, and like no one's doing too much right now. Like you can just start social media for it. You could just start sending me poems and I would love to read them. Like they're just kind of sitting in your journal collecting dust. So like let the world see it. And so started kind of just posting on Instagram. I had like 50 followers and they were all my friends and family. And it hasn't grown like a whole ton, but actually this had happened on one of your episodes of the podcast. It was one of the first ones I ever listened to, and it was talking about how flowers are so beautiful, but they're fragile and they're not deeply rooted. And it's like the trees and the things that endure all the seasons and the things that are like down in the soil and they need years and years to get sturdy, like those are the things that are going to withstand. And so I remember listening to that kind of as this like publishing contract was being in the works. And I was like, okay, like this could take years and years and years, but I much rather have it be rooted in the Lord than be like this pretty flower that I can whip up and self-publish. Like I wanted it to be something that could really reflect the heart of the Lord. And so about a year ago, and we were kind of figuring out like, okay, this could definitely become a book. And so the publisher is like, all right, let's do it. And now we're doing it. So it's fun.
That's amazing. And gosh, what a testament as well to like your willingness to commit to the process, because as a fellow writer, like I just
Yeah.
know that's hard. Like not only
Yes.
is it vulnerable putting yourself out there, like whether it's
Yes.
writing a book, social media, like sharing any bit of your like heart and passion with the
Mm-hmm.
world, like that's a vulnerable thing. And then adding to that, like you feel like it's what God is calling you to do, and it gives it this weight.
Yeah.
But like you said, trusting God for the timing of that is so huge. It's so silly. Like I do this all the time. It's like, okay, I have this idea. I need to do it now. Like I try to
Yeah.
make it happen, like in my own strength, in my own ability, like as fast as I can. And
Mm.
then just like you said, it's like, oh, wow, so glad that didn't work out. Like looking
Right.
back, there's so many things where I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord, that did not work because he knew better. And now how does it feel like holding that book in your hands, knowing like God has just sustained you in the process, and it's happening, like here you are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very surreal, which is like the most cliche thing to say, but it is. It's like we chose every font and every like curve of the letter and every like shade of the color. Like everything was just like a hands-on, let's make sure that this is what we want it to be. And it's funny because even like flipping through it, it's like you have all the voices in the back of your head of like, ooh, is that one really good? Oh, that one sounds kind of cringy. Oh, I don't know if people like that. Oh, is that one too personal? And it's like all of the thoughts just flood your head, but it's also like it's made and it's done and the Lord allowed it to happen. And so no matter what state it's in or whoever's hands it lands into, like that is what it's meant for. I chose a different dedication, but the dedication of the book that I was thinking about for a long time is like, to anyone who picks up this book, this is for you. Because I was like, I have no idea where this is going to go. It could literally never leave this house and no one ever buys it, or it could go internationally and be something that people read across the globe. No idea. But wherever it lands, if one person reads it and they're like, oh, I found this poem and that reminded me to go outside and thank God for making the stars today, like that is huge. And so I feel more so excited. It's like a Christmas Eve kind of thing. We're like, okay, I know tomorrow's Christmas, something's going to happen. It's like there's this joy in a deep part of my belly that's like, okay, like something good's going to come. No idea what it is. And it could be the smallest thing, but something's going to happen. And so just kind of that like eager anticipation that the Lord's going to use us how he uses it. And I have no idea what that's going to look like, but it's going to be fun to see what he comes up with, because it's better than whatever my brain could, like Ephesians 3:20 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I really relate to that. And it's so exciting living in that anticipation where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
God, like I've done what I can do and I trust you to take it from here.
Hmm.
That's just a wild and really exciting place to be in. So I'm so excited for you. And you guys, seriously, like it's beautiful, first of all, but like the contents and just seeing your heart through this is just the
Mm,
best part and really cool.
thank
So
you.
it's called To Be Human. Can
Hmm.
you kind of share like what's in this book? Like what can we
Yeah.
expect to feel and hear from this book?
It's a good question. So it's basically broken up into five different sections or chapters. And this was partially the publisher's idea, and I love her. Her name's Alexa. She's awesome. And she was like, okay, like I'm reading through all of your poems in this draft of the manuscript, and I'm noticing like these five different buckets that parts of humanity kind of fall into. And so there's like the human being, where you're kind of holding hands with existence, and just the fact that like everyone's got this in common. Like to quote Taylor Swift, it's like our one invisible string that's tying us all together. It's like this is the part that we can all nod our heads in agreement to. Like we understand what
Mm,
it is to be human and to just be, to just exist. So that's kind of the first bucket. And then the second one is talking about human performing. And like I mentioned earlier, like I've always been like I want to be the best at everything, very easily leaning into like a people pleaser, perfectionist. I want the gold stars, the A pluses, all
mm,
of that. And so to kind of say, like, I view the world as my stage and I feel this need to perform, but what does that look like? To have like a holy performance where actually the spotlight's not on you. It's like if people see something in you that they love, they're actually seeing the Jesus in you, and that is
mm,
you being a temple for the Spirit. And so that's kind of the second part where it leans into like, oof, I feel that need to be a performer for the world, but actually I'm a vessel for the Lord. And like it's a very slippery slope. So that's the second bucket of poems. And then the third bucket is human learning, which kind of comes in succession after performing. It's like, okay, I'm trying to do it for the world, but now I'm learning that's not actually what I'm called to do. And so it's
mm,
learning just kind of what it looks like to move forward, whether that's by inches or by miles. It's like you've got to progress. That also bleeds into the next one of human loving, which is like all the people that love me well and all the things and people that I love. And so that could be a relationship with your family, a relationship with a significant other, a relationship with yourself, with the Lord, with the sunset, like anything that you're just like, this is awesome. And there's love, or like there's God here because God's love. And so
mm,
anytime you see or feel that presence. And then the last one is humankind. And so it's kind of like the culmination of all those things. Like we're all now part of the humankind. Like the performing is part of it, existing is part of it, loving is part of it, learning is part of it. Like everything is just under this umbrella of like we're the humankind. And those two words like strung together, like we hope we're also human and kind at the same time. Like we're flawed and we know that, but we can also choose to be kind in the process. And so the
mm.
poems just kind of string through that lens of like this universal experience. Like I wanted everyone to find something in there for them, whether it was like a grandparent reading it or a little kid reading it. Like I want someone to see like, oh, I see myself in that one.
That's really cool and so interesting as well because I feel like, especially as believers, like we have this general understanding of what it is to exist and like be made
Mm-hmm.
in God's image and like eternity. But a lot of the times it stops right there. And it's like,
Yeah.
like we get the basics down, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't take time to really dig beneath that and have this deep understanding of what even I feel like sometimes it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable for us to start thinking that
Right.
deeply on some of these topics, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I have talked about this as well. Like something you talk about is how often believers view humanity as flesh in total
Mm-hmm.
opposition to what's holy, kind of what you were saying in
Mm-hmm.
that performance piece, like the tension there.
Right.
And then you explain that while in many ways that is true and biblical, God also puts emphasis on how we are made in his image. And
Yeah.
Jesus is, like Jesus became human too. So
Mm.
I just love to unpack that and hear more about
Yes.
what you've learned in the process as you yourself have gotten still and done this
Mm-hmm.
digging to explore
Right.
what it means to be human and now are putting words to it so that other people can go through this journey as well.
Yeah. Oh, I could beat this topic to death. There's so much to unpack. I think, oh, it's so good because Jesus really is that embodiment where we're like, okay, what would it look like to be holy and human at the same time? And God's like, there you go. I gave you my son. Like, there's the
Mm,
prime example. And I think it's hard because even like we talk all the time, like, you're made in God's image. And it's like, yes, okay, so we know that. But then immediately after Genesis 3, there's the fall. And we're like, well, that didn't last very long. It was for 2 chapters where things seemed to be going well. And so I think it is that harsh duality where it's human and it's divinity, but God like pairs them so well together, because being human is not the sinful part. It's like he created human and he saw that as good and he called it good. And it was only until sin entered the world that he was like, oh, okay, now I've got to send a savior. And so it doesn't start with humanity as already being this awful thing that needs to be reconciled. It was sin that needed to be reconciled. And so I think looking at ourselves and saying like, God had this intention for me to be here, and he had an intention for my nose to be slanted this way and for this amount of hairs on my head, and everything was meant to be, and he called that good, and he thinks it's so good that it needs to be saved if something ever tampers with it. And so as sin has tainted us, he's like, okay, thank goodness I've got Jesus, because now he's going to cover that so that I can bring my human back to me. And I think it's interesting when, you know, we're in heaven and we're just in the presence of God and we enter that dimension, like we're going to get new bodies. So it's not like the physical flesh that we're like, oh, this is the perfect part about humanity. It's like our skin and bone. It's like the soul within us and him making that his dwelling place. Like the temple is no longer this tent. It's like us. And that is crazy. And so I think realizing like we are now purified and we are renewed as humans, that just adds a whole other layer of like what it means to be human, because now it's not to be a sinned human, it's to be a reconciled human, and that is a really beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And honestly, gosh, there's so much depth to that. Like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
there's honestly no end to this
No.
conversation, how we could unpack it. But as you were like sharing, like as we realize that our humanity isn't what's wrong, it's our
Mm-hmm.
sin that's wrong. I feel like that like opens our eyes not only to how God views us ourselves
Right.
and like seeing, starting to reconcile, like I am not what the fight is against
Mm-hmm.
sin, like
Right.
Jesus loves me. He came to deal with my sin, not what's
Yeah.
wrong about me, like the
Yes.
disconnect there. He bridged the gap.
Yes.
But then
Mm-hmm.
also when we get that revelation and understanding and apply it to others, like realizing, gosh, there was an episode here where Aurelia Pratt said, once you start realizing and recognizing that you're made in God's image, like you cannot
Mm-hmm.
deny that everyone else is as well. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about like
Mm-hmm.
being in nature, being in relationships, to all these
Mm-hmm.
pieces of humanity. Like once you start to recognize, there's just no denying that God is in it.
Yeah.
And there's just like this deeper, like kind of you said, invisible string connecting
Yeah.
it all. And God's design is just so intricate and complex. Like it
Mm-hmm.
literally blows my mind thinking about it, because there's so much to it that we'll never understand fully.
Yeah.
But gosh, just like even starting to unpack that, it's like, whoa, there's so much weight, and
Mm-hmm.
not just like a pressure to be perfect and like this urgency on us, but it's just like, whoa, like our existence has meaning to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like God made us with purpose.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just kind of like opens your eyes to the reality that there is so much more to everyday life, more than just like going through the
Mm-hmm.
motions, being a human, living, working, dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Man, okay, so I have to know like your thoughts about the incarnation of Jesus, God
Mm-hmm.
becoming human. Like
Yes.
how does that impact our experience of being human, like relating to Jesus and his humanity?
Yeah, that's good. On the back of the book, there's like it's like the little red part, and it says like, "Hey, we have this in common." And I feel like with Jesus, God incarnated, that is so comforting, because it's like he's part of that. Like he's been part of the humankind. Like Jesus can be like, "Hey, I have this in common with you too," and we're like, "Oh, like the Lord of Lords has something in common with me? Like that's wild." And it's like he gets it, and he gets the pain, he gets the temptation, and he gets the joy, and he gets the reunion with friend, he gets seeing his mother be sad. Like he gets all of that. And I think when we look at his life and we're like, okay, this is what it looks like for holiness and humanity to come together, we're looking at his ministry. And as disciples of Jesus, if we are wanting to like understand what it looks like to follow him and literally like be getting like the dust of our rabbi on us, like that's an old Israelite Jewish proverb, and I think it's the most beautiful thing. It's like maybe be so close to your rabbi that you get the dust of his feet on you, and it's like so beautiful because you just want to be in that close proximity to him as you follow him. And if we're looking at his ministry, it's like he stopped for people and he didn't rush through things, and he stopped to take in the beauty of places, and he noted the hunger pains in his stomach, and he cried and mourned as his friend died, and he just wanted to be generous and multiply food for people. Like every part of his ministry, we're seeing him take note of the pieces of humanity, like hunger and like temptation, and add this like holy spin on it. And we're like, oh, so it is possible. And there's like the
Yeah.
verse that says like he's always going to provide a way out. Like you're never going to be stuck in your flesh. He's not going to like box you and be like, sorry, you missed it. Like this is your time. You're going to sin. He's like, there's always a way out, and I'm going to light up that path for you. And so I think it's so comforting to be like, God gets it. He sent his son to understand it for us. And it's almost like if you're going through something hard and your friend has gone through something similar, like you're going to call that person because you know that they understand it and they've lived through it and it's now their lived experience. And so I think when we pray and we're just talking to Jesus, we're like, so remember that time that you were in a rush to heal Jairus's daughter, but then you felt like something was calling you to the side of the road to heal a woman that's been bleeding for 12 years. I also feel really rushed to get through the day, but I know that there's this person that I have to talk to at lunch because they were sitting alone and I need to just be a friend to them right now. And it's like, God just gets it. And so I think it's that comforting piece, but it's also this like, he is on this pedestal because he's done it and he succeeded. And how are we supposed to kind of live as he lived and have that mirror back on our lives?
That's huge. And I feel like that, again, just like takes the pressure off of us to be the ones who are figuring it out and doing all the things. Like, it's not up to me. That's something I always have to come back to. I'm like, number one, it's not about me. Going back to the whole spotlight of performance, like, it's not on me. It's about Jesus. It's for Jesus. But just having that kind of relationship with him where you realize, wow, like you love me enough to have lived a full human life. Gosh, I read this book years ago and it said something that just changed my perspective forever. And it talked about how the gospel isn't just the fact that Jesus came and died for our sins and now reconciled us to God forever. It's also the fact that he came born as a baby and lived an entire human life so that he relates to every stage, every feeling, every temptation, like every bit of humanity. He got hungry. He was tired. He felt his feelings. Like he lived the human life and he lived it as God. And that's just crazy to think about because we do have, I love how in the Bible it talks about how we now have an advocate who understands. You know, we have a high priest who sympathizes with us. We don't have a God who's like, I can't relate like to your pain. Like I'm perfect up here and like you're down there doing who knows what, like good luck.
Yeah.
He gets it. He really does. And I think that's just so freeing. So were there moments for you as you were going through this process of writing, or I mean, like, you know, like writing in itself sometimes can just be it could be a deep healing work when we're just writing, you know, writing for ourselves and processing these things. Were there moments for you when you were writing that you just had moments with the Lord and you're just like, whoa, I have never realized this before. Like God just really revealed himself to you through writing these poems.
That's good. It was definitely about the poems, but I think it was more of the heart that I had going into it, where especially the performance section, that is so ironic if I'm writing about you shouldn't be a performer for the world and I'm like, oh, I hope they like this on every single poem. Like that would just be so hypocritical. And so every time I would like open up the laptop and start typing, or I'd open up a journal and start writing, it's like, God, please let these words align with your will. Like I don't want to put anything out there and say like, oh, this is showing you the good news, or like this is a reflection of Jesus, and have it not be. Or even like as it's now being put out there, like, hey, like now I have a book and this is super fun. My friends and family have been so encouraging, or even strangers are like, wow, that's awesome. And I have to remember like, okay, it's not so good that it's like, this could only be God, but it's like, I have to give it right back up. Like any praise, don't want to like sit and harbor that in my heart and be like, oh my gosh, like they think I'm really good. I must be awesome. Like don't let that happen. And so I think a lot of through the writing process and now sharing it process, it's been the Lord saying like, okay, you are my daughter, and I've given you gifts, and you have been told time and time again that words are a way that you help communicate ideas that I've told you. And so that's what we're going to do. Nothing more and nothing less. And so even like before prepping for this, I was thinking about the verse in Luke where it's talking about like your mouth is going to speak what your heart is full of. And so as I'm writing the poems or as we're talking now, it's like, God, my prayer is that you would fill my heart so much that I could only speak of you. And as the poems are coming out, may they only be a reflection of what you've put in me, nothing else. That's kind of a lot of rewiring your brain too, because our culture is so far from that. Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, you do you say what you want to do. Like, you'll get canceled, but that's fine. Like, just do it. And it's like, oh, that's actually not loving. And that's actually not what we're called to do as believers. So I think just kind of like if you walk on a patch of grass every single day, you're going to eventually have this little trail. And the same is like in our brains. If we keep thinking the same thought, that is going to become a habit, and it's going to create this pathway in our brains for our neurons to fire through. And I love that like science and psychology, it all reflects back to the Lord. And so he's like, okay, make a good pathway, like make your brain think a way that's honoring to me, and that's going to become your habit. And so as I'm writing, I'm like, okay, I got to prep my heart and prep my mind to think in a way that honors the Lord and truly reflects his scripture, or else I'm just going to be writing out of my heart that's been formed by the world instead of formed by Jesus. And I don't want that to happen. So it was a lot of like getting in the word before creating words of my own.
That is so good. And that's, I mean, it takes really a lot of intention to
Mm-hmm.
commit to doing that, because it is so easy in our world of, especially American culture of like
Mm-hmm.
likes, fast results,
Yes.
constant affirmation from other people or lack of,
Mm-hmm.
that is
Yeah.
driving the way that we feel, driving what we do, driving all of our, desires and all of it. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like uncommon to have that approach, but it
Mm-hmm.
is so good and healthy. Like that's how God designed us, is to kind of put on blinders in that way. Like
Mm-hmm.
ask God, like, help me speak what is true. Help me
Mm-hmm.
focus on what is true. Help me meditate on your word, your truth, and let everything else go. It's like putting on
Mm-hmm.
blinders and
Yeah.
being committed to just keeping your eyes fixed on him, fixed on truth, and letting all the other stuff fall away, even though it does sound really good sometimes and attractive to
Mm-hmm.
chase those other things. It's just never
Right.
fulfilling. And something else that you said that I think is such a good point is the fact that we're vessels. Like in our
Mm-hmm.
humanity, we are vessels. And I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on this, because as you were
Mm-hmm.
just sharing about that a minute ago, and the praise that we get from people, we
Mm-hmm.
just give it right back up. It's almost
Right.
like we're vessels, God works through
Yeah.
us, but then every bit of praise, every bit of good comes back through us, back up to him. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's a part of being a vessel that's often forgotten, is
Mm-hmm.
the part that we give it all back to him. All the praise,
Yes.
all the glory that we receive, like it really is for
Mm.
him. It's only by him that we're able to
Yeah.
accomplish these things anyway. So how has this new realization and understanding of being human
Mm.
changed the way you live in your day-to-day life, relationships with other people, in your
Yeah.
work, in your writing, everything?
Yes. Oh, well, it's funny that you mentioned work because that's like the first place my mind goes to. I mean,
Right.
like you do it every day as your job. So you spend hours and hours in that place, but it's like a special time because I'm working with adults and coworkers. But then I'm
Mm,
also working with children where their brains are not fully developed and they're going through so many things. And it's such an impressionable age. Before I took this job, was reading through because I've journaled my whole life and I was reading through some of my journals when I was 14. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like I was convinced all 5 members of One Direction were going to fight for me at the altar and want to marry me. So I don't even know what is going on now in today's culture. And so I was really praying before taking this job. And this isn't my first year teaching, but every year of teaching, this has kind of been the verse that's come to mind. And I worked at a private school last year, and this was actually the verse of the year that they chose. It's Matthew 5:16. The context is they're talking about like, you are a city on a hill that can't be hidden. Why would you put your light under a lampshade? Like, it is meant to be out there for people to see. People are supposed to be seeing Jesus in you. And then it goes on to say, like, let them see the light in you so that they can glorify your Father in heaven. And it doesn't end
mm,
period of like, let them see the light in you. period. And like you is emphasized. It's not that at all. It's the so that, the therefore, the here's why, because we're supposed to be pointing people right back to Jesus. And we just finished this school year like 3 days ago. And I'm a huge words of affirmation person. And so all the eighth graders that were sending me cards or like writing things on my whiteboard, talking so much like you're so kind, or you have just a joy about teaching, or like you've been my favorite teacher all of middle school, or like I'm going to miss you so much, I want to come visit. And my heart is getting like overflowing to the brim of love. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. But every time it was like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Like, thank you that they saw a fruit of your spirit. Like they saw kindness, and that was you. Like that could not have been me, because there were so many days that I was feeling so impatient and so frustrated. And I was like, just be kind, just be kind. And that was like, thank goodness that they noticed that, because they're noticing you and they're noticing that there's something different and they don't know what that is. But hopefully that is like one of the first seeds that can be planted, so that later on they can be like, oh, do you remember what was my eighth grade teacher's name? I don't know, but I remember that she was really trying to be loving. And that's like, if they don't remember my name, I want them to at least remember Jesus's name through the feelings that they got of being around me. And so I think the day-to-day life, it's like every inch of our world is a mission field. And it's, you always feel like you can go across the world or you can go across the street. Every person is worth reaching and every person is worth loving. Like looking at an office building and all the different windows, and like every person in there was created by God and loved by him. And they have a life of their own and a family of their own and a world of their own. And I'll probably never meet them, but they are still part of God's humankind, and he's part of the mission, and he is part of what he's created the world to be. And just remembering that the world is so much bigger than you, and that every single day there's an opportunity to reach someone, because the world is wide and wonderful, and we need the Lord. Every single day is an opportunity to be a missionary. Every single day is a day to assume the best about someone. And yeah, I think it's just kind of saying like, today's the day that the Lord's made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it. And Great Commission, let's go out and make disciples. However, that is a sense of urgency to go out and do something and not waste our day, which again, in our culture is so not it. It's like we can scroll and scroll for hours, and our screen time on our Sunday notification is super embarrassing. We're like, oh, did I really spend that many hours just on this world in my pocket of my phone, versus actually going out and seeing life as it is?
So it just changes your whole perspective when you can look at life and people. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
our role as believers representing Christ in the world, like really does shift everything. Because even me as a mom, like something I've been saying
Mm-hmm.
lately, because I'm in this very heavy
Yeah.
season of stay-at-home
Yeah.
momhood, and it is really hard some days. And I'm sure you can
Mm.
relate being a teacher, just like sometimes kids press your buttons, sometimes you're
Mm-hmm.
tired, sometimes you feel stretched so thin, and it's like, Lord, I do not have the patience for this. I don't know if I
Mm-hmm.
can handle it another minute. In our culture, it's like this idea of don't waste your life, don't waste your day, means
Mm-hmm.
be as productive as you can, do as
Mm-hmm.
many things as you can, make as much money as you can. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the sorts of things that our world today measures success or achievement or meaning by.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that and miss the fact that a lot of times the little things that we do are what people are watching and what will
Right.
impact people and what make the most difference. So like for me in motherhood lately, if I ever feel this like wrestle with my season, or I feel hesitant to like lean into this slow season of being a stay-at-home mom, I
Mm-hmm.
just say to myself, there is nothing more important I could be doing right now.
Yeah.
There is absolutely nothing more important I could be doing right now than raising my kids, giving them my attention, spending time with
Mm-hmm.
them, loving them. Like it's so easy to forget that those are the things, whether you're at work, it's like there's nothing more important I could be doing right now than maybe talking to a coworker, maybe
Mm-hmm.
putting some other things on hold so that you can be there for a neighbor or a friend or
Mm-hmm.
your spouse or your family. It changes everything when you're able to approach life that way, because Jesus, he wasn't like in our world's eyes a super productive person,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he did a lot, obviously in his ministry he was doing the most. Okay, but still, like he knew when to say no, he knew when to
Yeah.
withdraw, he knew when to focus in on a few people and have conversations with one person, like stopping what he was doing to have a conversation with Nicodemus over the fire, like
Mm-hmm.
stopping what he was doing to go and reconcile with Peter. There was nothing more important. He knew there was nothing more important that he could be doing right now, even though there were 100 other needs around him probably on a daily basis, you know,
Right.
but being able to look at daily life, often the things that seem so ordinary or mundane
Mm-hmm.
can really be a huge way that God shows up in our humanity. And I think it's so cool whenever you get that realization to just be like, okay, like every bit of this matters. Even the smallest, simplest things can make a huge
Yeah.
difference for somebody else. You may never know, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to know, is there a specific poem? I'm sure it's hard to choose one, but is there one if just really resonates with you, or if someone who's listening right now is just struggling with this idea of, I want to be the best version of myself, but also I want to be this humble like vessel for the Lord. Like, what's a poem? Maybe you can give us a sneak peek of a poem that you would want them to hear.
This one is from the first part where it's talking about human being and just kind of like us existing day to day, which I think kind of goes about what you're saying of like the mundane, the day to day life. Like every day is the special occasion. Like there's always something in these 24 hours. And a lot of my poems are super short, so they're quick to read. But this was one of the first poems that I think put on Instagram when I made my like social media account for it. But it's one of my favorites because I think it shows like the heart of the Lord in just the ways that he gives us comfort in our day to day. It's called Hand Holding, and it goes like this. I don't think it's much of a coincidence that the times I feel lonely and afraid and have to hold my own hand to get through the day, I'm put in the posture of prayer. And I think it's just really showing like the Lord's never going to leave you, even if you feel like you're in it on your own. I'm very introverted by nature, and I love like my quiet time and my alone time, but like I don't ever feel lonely. It's just a solitude because I like know that the presence of the Lord is in the room with me, and he's in front and behind and to the side. And like it says in Psalms, there's nowhere I could go in the highest mountain or the lowest valley. Like he sees me. And I think like the Lord gives us even something as comforting as like someone holding your hand. It's like you do that when you're a little kid and you scrape up your knee and your mom holds your hand to get a Band-Aid, or when you fall in love with someone, it's a way to show affection. You hold your hand, or like girlhood, you're skipping together with your friends and you're holding hands. Like there's just so many instances where we do that, but also it's like a time to humble yourself before the Lord. And you're like, no distractions. My hands aren't going to be busy with anything else. They're going to come together. And it's a comforting posture physically that inwardly changes your posture towards the Lord too. So I feel encouraged by that poem.
That is so beautiful. I love that so much. And you guys, I'm telling you, this is just a scrape of the surface of what Clio has shared in this book and also on social media, and just the way that you've been willing to be a vessel and share just the revelations of God that you've received through your relationship with him, and giving language to those feelings of humanity and wrestling through truth to find Jesus at the end of it. It's just really special. And I'm so grateful for you committing to the process and doing that. So now we have things like this beautiful book.
Yes.
So please tell everybody, where can they get your book? Where can they connect with you, continue these conversations, hear more of your poetry?
Thank you. My poetry account on Instagram is at ink.trees, which a lot of people are like, why is it called that? It originally was kind of saying like it's the ink from a pen and the paper from a tree. And so ink and trees.
Love it.
And yeah, the book will be officially released on July 30th. And so it'll be on Goldscript Co.'s website, which is just goldscriptco.com. It'll also be on Amazon and some like local bookstores.
Yay! Well, I'm so excited. Congratulations again on getting this beautiful book out into the world.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I am truly so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. And quick favor, if you enjoyed this episode, would you take a second to leave a review? It really helps our community grow. If you want more, you can shop my books Waking Up and Love Is at thehannahhughes.com or on Amazon. And be sure to join my email list for all the latest news. I can't wait to chat again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come connect with me on social media, and remember, I'm cheering you on.